Hello, children. It's Grandma Carla, and I am here at the beginning of our spring break with more of Freddy Goes to Florida. And I hope you are enjoying this book as much as I am. Remember that they were curled up comfortably on the floor of the house where they found all the treasure. Alice did not sleep very well that night. She had a stomach ache. And she had a stomach ache because she'd eaten 2 chocolates and a caramel and a horehound drop that Robert had given her out of a bag of candy that he had found by the roadside. Robert had offered Emma some too, but she had very sensibly refused it. Candy does not agree well with ducks. So she couldn't sleep. No matter how hard she tried, Alice got up before daylight and went out into the woods. The cool morning air made her feel sleepy, so she thought she would try again, and having found a sheltered spot under a big pine, she tucked her head under her wing and she dozed off. When she woke up, the sun was shining, and the swallows were pouring out like smoke out of the chimney in search of their breakfast. Alice called to one of them and asked them about the burglars. "They've been here about a month," said the swallow. "They go out every night and rob the farmers' houses and then come back and sleep all day. They usually get back about this time every morning, so you animals had better look out." "I don't think they will be back this morning," said Alice. "But tell me, did they dig up the gold that we found when we were here before?" "No," said the swallow. "They haven't touched it." "Thank you," said Alice. "That was all that I wanted to know. Good morning." And she hurried back to tell the others that their treasure was safe. But when she got back to the house, she stopped in amazement upon the threshold. Her sister Emma was waddling importantly up and down with a bracelet set with big blue sapphires around her neck and a beautiful bag, all made of little links of pure gold, tucked under her wing. The 4 mice, with diamond rings around their necks like collars, were playing tag in a corner, and they sparkled and glittered like little streaks of fire as they chased one another. Henrietta looked very queenly, with a hoop of rubies set upon her head like a crown. She was bending down and trying to see herself in the little mirror set in the cover of a powder box, which she had snapped open with her claw. But Mrs. Wiggins was the most gorgeous of all. There was a rope of pearls about her big neck and a platinum wristwatch on her left ankle. And she had hung an emerald necklace on each horn, and they hung down and bobbed and dangled beside her broad, pleasant face like an enormous earrings. And she had powdered her wide black nose until it was as white as flour. She looked truly reckless. Alice, after a moment of astonishment, entered into the fun. She found a thin gold chain with a diamond and pearl locket, which she hung around her neck, and then she went over to where Henrietta was still admiring herself in the powder box cover and asked if she might have some powder for her bill. "There isn't any left," said Henrietta. "I'm sorry, Alice," said Mrs. Wiggins. "I'm afraid I have quite used it all up. There's so much of me to powder, you know. I do wish I could see myself, though I may say I don't believe I have improved my appearance much. I must look like an overdressed washerwoman. You can't do much with a cow," she added sadly. Then Robert and Jack played a game. Each took 6 bracelets, and Mrs. Wiggins stood perfectly still, and they tried to throw them over her horns, but they weren't very good at it. And after Mrs. Wiggins had been hit on her nose several times, she said she guessed she wouldn't play any more, as they were knocking all of the powder off. Then Henrietta said, "What are we going to do with all of this jewelry?" "We ought to give it back to the people it was stolen from," said Hank. "All very fine," said Henrietta, "but how do you propose to do that?" Hank said he didn't exactly know. So they talked it over for a while and at last hit upon a plan. And after breakfast, they loaded all of the stolen things into the carriage and started out for the nearest farmhouse. When they got there, there was nobody in sight, but Jack and Robert barked until at last a woman came to the door to see what was the matter. She was a large, fat woman and looked quite a lot like Mrs. Wiggins. She was wiping soap suds off of her hands on an apron because she had been washing her husband's other shirt. "Land sakes alive!" she exclaimed when she saw the animals all grouped about a carriage. "What is this, a circus?" It took quite a long time for the dogs to make her understand what they wanted her to do. They ran back and forth between her and the carriage, and at last she followed them. And when she saw the heap of money and the jewelry, she gave a loud cry and seized the hoop of rubies that Henrietta had worn on her head. "Land of love," she cried, "here's the ring that Cousin Eunice gave me last Christmas, the one that the burglars stole when they broke into our house a month ago. And here's the emerald necklace I won as a prize at the Pedro Club last winter. And here's Hiram's gold cigarette case." She ran to the corner of the house. "Hiram, Hiram," she called, "come here this minute." So pretty soon, Hiram, her husband, came from where he had been resting up in the hayloft, and he found $20 besides the cigarette case that the burglars had taken from him. "Now, how do you suppose these animals got these things?" he said. "Do you suppose they found the place where the burglars hid them?" "I don't know about that," said his wife, "but I do know that they brought them here so that we could pick out what belonged to us. Such good, clever animals. I'm going to kiss every one of you," which she did, even the mice, who were scared to death. She looked very funny after she had kissed Mrs. Wiggins because a lot of the powder came off on her face. "Now," she said, "I'm going to go over to Aunt Etta's with these animals because I saw her golden soup tureen among these things." And she climbed into the phaeton and they started off while Hiram went back to do some more resting up in the hayloft. Aunt Etta was an educated woman. Every evening she sat on the porch and she read the paper until it got so dark that she could not see, and then she went in and she lighted the lamp and finished reading it. So when she had taken her soup tureen and one or two other things that the burglars had stolen, she said, "I know who these animals are. I saw a piece in the paper about them only last week. They're migrating. They came from way up north and went to Florida for the winter. They're very clever animals indeed. I expect they're on their way home now, as it's spring." "Well," said her niece, "they won't get home until fall at this rate. They'll have to visit about 100 farms to get all of this stuff back to the people it belongs to. It's too bad they can't find a quicker way." "A lot of things have been advertised for in the paper," said Aunt Etta. "How would it be if we put an advertisement in saying that all of the things were here and the people could come here and get them? Then the animals wouldn't have to traipse all over the country and they could go on home in a day or two." The niece thought that this was a very good idea, and the animals looked at one another and nodded, and so Robert barked very loud to show that they thought it was a good idea. Then Aunt Etta got up. "I'll go in and telephone the paper office right away," she said, "and have the advertisement put in tonight. And then we'll give these animals something to eat and a place to be comfortable. They must be tired, having come such a long way." So she telephoned the newspaper office, and then she went out into the barn and got some oats for Hank, and she showed Alice and Emma where the pond was and introduced them to her own ducks, and she found 2 bones for the dogs and a piece of cheese for the mice and a saucer of cream for Jinx, and she cooked up some cornmeal mush for Charles and Henrietta and led Mrs. Wiggins out to the pasture where she had a very superior quality of grass. If she had noticed Mr. and Mrs. Webb, she would probably have tried to catch some flies for them. She was such a kind and generous old lady, and so grateful for the return of her gold soup tureen. Then, when the animals had all been given the things that they liked the best to eat, she sat down on the porch and told her niece everything that she had read in the paper for the last 6 weeks. And this is Grandma Carla, and I love you.